Tony and Brian Travis. Are there any announcements? Any announcements? Okay, seeing none, let's move to item 3, comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. And please keep those comments to 5 minutes in length. Molly, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Thank you all for hearing me. I am Molly Hanford. I am on the Porch Fest Committee, which is sponsored by the Westchester Green Team. We had our event this past May. I'm not sure if you are all informed of what it is, but shortly after COVID, the Green Team thought that they needed some sort of event for the neighborhood. This is in the Southwest Quadrant, to sort of bring people back out and have something joyful to look forward to. So they did a musical Porch Fest, and that was in 2022. The Green Team normally does things that involves the environment and the arts. And so they thought music fit in well with community development for our little neighborhood. So it was a great success. So we did it again last year and again this year. The reason I'm here on behalf of our committee is this is a completely volunteer-run event. Everything is all volunteer. In order to raise money for the event, for any costs that we have to rely on sponsorships and donations from individuals, businesses, and partnerships. And we were hoping to raise enough money to cover the expenses. And our largest expense this year was the borough's invoice. It went from $8,300 in 2023 to $15,569 this year. It covers the police cost, public works. The invoice does not include the Good Fellowship, but the estimation did. So when you add in the Good Fellowship costs, it comes to about $15,559. So I am here on behalf of the Green Team and Porch Fest to ask for some sort of decrease on the invoice.
So I know we're looking into all the fees. Truthfully, right now, my opinion is not yet. I don't want to approve anything yet because Barb's here. We got item old business B that Barb's been looking at all our fees and what we want them to be. And it sounds like this event's far enough out that you still have opportunity to look for sponsorships and things like that. And that it's probably,
That's May.
oh,
We already have the invoice.
you want money from your last.
Well, we haven't paid it. The event was on May 18th. We received the invoice. I was out of the country. I finally talked to somebody and I said, I need to address this with the borough if there's any way to get some of it taken off.
Well,
the
then
invoice.
I'm saying, oh, that's mismanagement on your funds, and I'm not sure I can approve something. I mean, that's budgeting in the past. I don't think it's fair to come to the borough and ask us for money for an event that you guys were running that did not make enough money, and now you're coming to us to bail you out. That's kind of how I'm hearing it.
I'm not sure if I'm asking you to bail us out because the estimation for the event was still twice the amount of what it was last year.
I'd need to see some a financial statement. I need to see an understanding. I'd also like to understand from Barb what the costs were of what we charged. I mean, I just coming to us saying you have an invoice from last year that you want money for because you didn't make as much money as you thought you would. It's not adding up to me, unfortunately. So
Part of the issue is this is a nonprofit, the Green Team, and when we go out to raise money, we try to have an excess amount so that we can give some money back to the Green Team for the events. And some of it is the alleyways, beautification. This year, we're at a deficit of close to $3,000.
yeah, and I'm on the board of the Uptown Canawer Performing Arts Center, which is also a nonprofit. And I will tell you that we have not come to the borough to ask for money when we also had some very tough years in the past. We hunkered down and did a lot of thought and a lot of additional volunteering by a lot of great people to turn the theater around and try to get it back on its feet. So again, with minimal information, just coming and saying, oh, we had more expenses than we thought we were going to have last year, and we'd like a break from the borough, I'm not ready to support that with the data that you're coming to the table with right now. That's my
Is there
thoughts.
a way to maybe after we go through the fee schedule that you guys are talking about, why it was twice, almost twice the amount that it was last year? The footprint hadn't changed.
I think there needs to be some more research done by Barb before
Okay.
any of us discuss about reimbursement or anything like that, I believe. Point of clarification, Uptown did come to Westchester to forgive a $200,000 loan.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Oh, well,
that
I'll have to go
happened.
back to-
That
Did
happened.
it get forgiven?
No.
Yeah, okay, so it didn't get forgiven.
It didn't get
Okay,
forgiven,
so-
but that was.
So this,
that-
at least my thought process is consistent.
Okay.
Yeah, that was last year. But in this particular case, I do think there needs to be more information. The other thing that was made to my attention, brought to my attention, was there was a reduced cost for the Clydesdales. That was reduced. And, you know, I mean, I don't want to get in the habit of reducing fees for certain events and prioritizing other events. But I do think overall, we probably should be consistent moving forward. So if it's okay, I think maybe we table this to next month, let Barb do some research moving forward. I don't know if you have any comments here, Mr. Travis.
Did you get an estimate of the public safety
We
costs?
did receive an estimate, which was below the invoice by about, let me think, estimate was 14.4. The invoice came about 2,000 more. The actual.
Okay, so you know the costs were going to go up considerably though from the year before.
Maybe I should have come before that.
I'm wondering, yeah, I mean, that would have been, obviously it would have been a good time to ask questions,
Right.
and then maybe scale back something, but besides the point, it's already happened.
Right.
It is something we're looking into, and I know it's on the mayor's radar because, you know, certain events happen in only part of the town. How much of the boroughs, how much do we chip in when not all the boroughs involved in some of these events? So we're trying to figure it all out right now.
The mayor's office was absolutely, completely helpful when we first ventured into the Porch Fest.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is we need to look at all of our fee structure because what's been happening is I think we feel that we've been sharing too much of the burden and
Okay.
it goes directly to taxpayers. So we're being conscious of that. So let us figure it out. I think Brian's right. We're going to table it. We'll take a look at some things.
All right.
Definitely come back. Hopefully we'll have some answers.
Thank you
Yeah.
for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Sorry. I wondered-
Thank you.
Yeah, I would also, if we're tabling this though, I would also recommend that you come with data, like, again, you know, what was your,
I was here tonight, so I'm like, darn, I should have come with data for you because
I'm a data gal.
Thank you. Are there any other comments, suggestions, petitions? Seeing none, let's move to item 4, the Director's Monthly Financial Report.
Good evening. If we could start with page 2 of the report, please. The July 31st cash position, page 2, we started the month with 24,779,000 cash. We booked 4,566,856 in receipts. We spent $5,292,300, and we ended the month with an ending cash balance across all funds of $24,053,614. And this is does not include OPEB or the pension funds. Moving over to page 3, I have an ARPA update for you. Looking at this summary, we had 27 projects that we have spent through the ARPA funding that we received a few years ago. The total of those projects since inception is $1,825,800. As of July 31st, Bill, if you could just scroll a little bit towards the right, please. I mean, up a little bit. There's a little box on the bottom that I'd like to show. scroll down. Yep, there you go. So as of July 31st, 2024, we have an ending cash balance in the ARPA fund of $384,238. Of that amount, we still have 2 projects that have been allocated and are not quite completed yet. Those 2 projects being the High and Minor Street project and the Recreation Master Park Plan. The total of those 2 projects is $120,886. So if we take away that amount that still needs to be allocated, we have a remaining balance of $263,352 that we need to have allocated by the end of this year and spent by 2026. It is our hope that we could use this money for our capital projects planning for the 2025 budget. Moving over to the rest of the report, starting on page 4, the budget to actual highlights for the month ended July 31st. Looking at the month, the general fund booked a net loss of $548,009, and year-to-date is sitting at a net income of $2,318,523. The target for line items as of July 31st is 42%. Looking at the general fund highlights, page 15, Bill, if you could go to that, please. The admin fund, looking at the revenues, EIT continues to perform very strongly. D-transfer, while not quite where we would like it to be as of for our expectations, it is picking up. So is real estate taxes in collections. Interest income is knocking it out of the park. We are $68,000 better than budget. We finally received our final payment on the Greenlight Go grant. That payment was received in July for $169,000. Going down further down the list, state pension, we expect to receive that in September. Our workers' comp reimbursement is a line by line by case. Any monies that we receive from the insurance company offsets the expense. And finally, the UComp reimbursement, we expect to receive that late in the fall. Moving over to building and housing on page 12. Their revenue line items are trailing expectations at this point in time. The rental permits went out slightly later than in prior years. They went out in August of this year, so we expect the revenue to catch up, between August and September and October. And we are seeing trash violations and mechanical permits are also trailing budget. There will be no fire inspection revenue or fire inspection expense. This position will not be filled in 2024. Moving over to the Public Works revenue highlights, page 14, please. The recycling grant, we expect to receive this in either August or September, and winter maintenance most likely will come in later in the fall. The street openings line item, we expect the revenues to increase slightly in the fall, but we may not meet our target for this year. We just found out through our budget workshop today with Public Works that some of the work that Aqua and Pico does will not be done until 2025. Looking at the expense highlights for the general fund, overall revenues and expenses for the general fund are meeting our expectations, but there are a few line items that I'd like to point out that are overspent. If we go to page 14, the Public Works Department, the overtime line item is overspent. And in the administration department on page 15, admin expense is over budget. In the finance department, we had a resignation back in June, and we are backfilling that position with temporary help through a temporary agency. And collection fees is also overspent because of the muni billing AR system for taxes. Looking at the special revenue funds, fire, stream protection, and liquid fuels. Fire is on page 17, stream protection on page 22, and liquid fuels on page 21. Those are all meeting expectations. There's nothing special to report in those line items. And then finally, the enterprise funds, sewer and parking. Starting with the sewer fund on pages 18 and 19. The fund month to date has booked a net income of $275,518 and a year to date net income of $1,628,260. On the revenue side, interest income is doing very well, and so are the sewer monthly rentals. On the expense side, again, while revenues and expenses are meeting our expectations at this point in time, we do see two line items that one is close to being overspent, which is the overtime. There's only about $500 left in that line item, so that is most likely will be overspent for the year. And professional fees are overspent by $18,000. I do expect that number to go up as the year progresses. And that's a fees associated with consultants for the capital projects in the sewer fund. And then the parking fund on pages 20 and 21. Month to date, the fund booked a net income of $186,240 and a year-to-date net income of $709,816. Revenues are meeting expectations. Again, interest income is doing very well in that fund. Lot revenue, we expect this line item to catch up in August because we received the payment from the county for their parking spaces. And then permit revenue will pick up in August and September because that's when the bulk of the permitting is done. Overall, revenues and expenses are meeting expectations, but on the expense side, overtime is overspent by $14K as of July 31st. Are there any questions?
I have one, a couple, regarding July,
Yes.
the negative for July.
For the general fund?
Yeah, the general fund. So what is that mainly due to? It's roughly about 500,000.
So a lot of that is because in the general fund, we had some grants that have come through where we didn't have the revenues booked, but we have expenses that are going against that. So you have to remember these are on a cash basis. So we're booking based on when we're receiving invoices and when money is coming in. That's one of the big things. And then we have line items that are not performing according to expectations. So you're going to have the revenues that aren't supporting line items that are overspent. That is month to date. But, you know, through the year ended, we are sitting at a 2.3 net income. So
Right.
overall, it is good
Right.
for the year.
Right. I totally agree. With the general fund, the fire fund, the sewer fund, those individual funds are all invested in high yield savings. Would that be correct?
Yes, we have Pliget accounts set up for all of those funds.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. Any questions, further questions?
Just one question about the general fund deficit. It's timing related, but do we expect to see that catch up at some point in the next few months?
Yeah, I expect based on the results now that if the revenues keep coming in and we do have overages in some of our revenue line items, that will offset some of the overspending in some of the others. So I like to say at this point in time, I like to be cautiously optimistic. I wish I had a crystal ball and I know things come up, but I think Mr. Metric does a very good job of, you know, controlling expenses and knock on wood, I think we'll be in a good position ending the year. So
I think too, it's worth noting, and thanks, I appreciate that, Barb. And I want to go right back at you and say you're doing a great job managing the cash flow. For us to really kill it on interest income, especially in the general fund, is really impressive. The other thing is that, you know, in government, you lose probably on a monthly basis, you probably have like 9 losing months and maybe 3 that you come out in the black because your real estate revenue all hits by April. And that's, so far we booked $5.8 million, and I bet all that money got booked in the first 4 months of the year. So we're going to look really flush in April and May, and then we get through the rest of the year. But since we are also EIT heavy in Westchester, it helps with cash flow during the year, but we're always going to be losing money, I think, every month except for March and April, where we really kill it.
So to that point, Barb, I know you mentioned like you're measuring to 42%. Is that only expenses or is that also revenues
That's on
or?
both sides. So if you look at parts of the report, revenues are doing well in a majority of the departments. The only one that is really trailing at this point in time in the general fund is the housing department. But again, that's because, they have a new system in place, they have new staff. So some of the things that happened in prior years are just, there's a little bit of a catch up at this point in time.
To that point though, are there certain revenue streams that we should not be measuring with the same 42%, right? So is that something
I
that
try
will?
to say overall, when you look at the bottom line, overall, all funds are meeting where we would expect them to be at this point in time. So while there was a net loss for the month, I still say for the year, we're still in the positive.
Right.
And we
No-
can have an offline discussion
Yeah,
if that
yeah.
doesn't make sense.
No, it
Or if you
sounds
wanna
like
see
you're
it-
managing to it. I think it goes back to the reporting out and that for clarity for those of us that don't look at the numbers on a daily basis, it's like if you say that we're supposed to be like, and this is any business, right? Any business is going to have those ebbs and flows, I've been in years for retail, right? Christmas season, all that stuff. There's always that certain point of year. And so how do we make sure that we are aware of where we should be versus the flat 42% that was just mentioned? That's all. But it sounds like you've got it covered and you've got it covered in that bottom line, but is there opportunity to call out some of those funds where actually we expect that we should be at 80% in this fund at this point in time or something like that as we look at the report? But so anyway, that's just an aside. I had another question. The other question I had, this a little bit minutia, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because when you went through, you said something about how fire inspection was like 0 and we're expecting it to be 0. And especially I have a constituent that's been talking to us all about safety and especially short-term rental safety and inspections and things like that. And to hear that we are budgeting 0 for fire inspections, especially knowing that we just recently had a very terrible fire that happened in the borough. Is the money somewhere else, or we like what's going on there?
So when we prepared the 2024 budget, our assumption was that we were going to hire a fire inspection employee that would go out and do all of that work, and that that came with a cost, and then that would be offset by a revenue line item. So the point that I was trying to make is, while that particular department may not look as well, if you took that piece out, it's doing a little bit better than normal because, to the best of my knowledge, that position is not going to be filled.
But the position,
Can I
yeah.
find stuff? Somebody's storing improper things like oil fire heater. Deciding, hey, not supposed to store flammable items that close. Test the sprinklers. Kevin's departure, that whole stand that up evaporated. I just want to be real clear that all of your rental licenses, which is where this fire happened, get inspected, and the person going and performing that inspection is checking for fire safety, egress, accumulation of debris around waste to get out. and they're looking for functional smoke alarms. So I don't want anyone listening to this discussion go away thinking we aren't looking at fire safety issues in homes. This was a program conceived by Kevin to stand up a new thing that we weren't currently doing. And in the last 6 to 8, 9 months, working with building and housing, now's not the time to do something new. We're doubling down on what we are assigned to do, what our core responsibilities are, and maybe this comes up again. I don't think you're going to see this come up in our budget discussions.
So do we, you said we inspect rentals. So do we not fire inspect businesses at this point in time? Is that are they required to get inspections, and that when we do our other inspections, we make sure that they got the fire inspections? How does that work?
Inspections are performed when permits are issued. So if someone was doing a renovation or work at a commercial property, we would go in and we would check those facilities. If it were a new commercial space, we're going in and checking those things. But we don't have routine inspection cycles for commercial businesses like we do with rentals, residential rentals. So that's all driven by the inspections we are performing is all driven by people applying for permits.
So I know I'm going to get in the weeds, but I'm going to ask anyway, because I'm going to ask. Short-term rentals, we've been talking about it, and my understanding is that rentals with more than 2 units, 3 units and more are actually kind of under like commercial type of codes. So how are they going to get inspected?
To answer that question after I meet with the solicitor tomorrow and the building inspector.
Okay.
Any further questions from the public regarding the director's monthly report? All right, seeing none, let's move to old business. Item 5, motion to approve defined contribution 401A plan amendment. And the issue here is correct one of the Auditor General's findings by removing loan provisions in the defined contribution plan.
Pretty self-explanatory. This was something that popped up. We looked at the plan document. We're going to change the plan doc. It needs action of council to do so. And this gets one of those repeat audit findings taken care of.
Any questions from the dais? Any public comment? Any objections to approving this, putting this on consent? Seeing none, so we can put this on consent. Item B, discuss special events fee calculation. The borough charges fees for special events that require public works and police overtime services and equipment. It also refunds a portion of those fees through a special event parking fee for certain large events in town center. These rates are adopted annually by resolution of Borough Council. And it looks like that there were some recommendations here, $10 for all events, 50% will be credited back, $150 an hour for police, $90 an hour for public works. And the signing and posting will be charged in accordance with the fee schedule. Are there any comments from the dais about those recommendations?
Just a
So-
clarification on the $10 fee, is that $10 per? What is that?
So the recommendation here, after we met with staff and we looked at information that was provided by Mr. Kowalski for the 2022 events for the chili cook-off and for the Christmas parade, after looking at some of the information, we quickly realized that there were a different parking garage event fees being charged for the different events. And one of the things that I'm attempting to do here is to make that fee the same across all the across the board for all the events, with that being at $10 from the beginning of the event to the end, and then giving 50% of that back to the applicant. So it was just an attempt to make it an across the board fee for all events.
So, how, like, How did you get to the $150 an hour for police services? Because these are the questions that will get asked by John sitting back there in the corner. How are we getting this versus the expenses that we have?
So we did an analysis of every employee that has puts their hand in this event, essentially, has a part in it. And we took the 2023 year ending W-2 salaries. So we started with that, and we factored in overhead first, FICA, unemployment, pension expense, and all those different calculations. And one of the first things we realized was that these events are things that happen outside the scope of normal borough services. So therefore, they're paid at an overtime premium. So we then calculated all of that at the overtime rate for both police and public works employees. And we found that in the majority of the two events, there was, a minimum of one supervisor that was needed for police, and the same for public works, and then, line staff. So then after we did the calculation, we took a median average of the highest, officer and supervisor in both police and public works. And that's how we determined the $150 and $90.
So at this point, you are, because I know questions came up with cars and things like that. So you're just taking the cost of the police and the work, their overtime, their costs, and that's what
Yeah,
you're.
with, overhead for payroll taxes and social security and, kind of a utilization factor. And again, this is an attempt to, I think, make it easier across the board for everyone. I know there was a lot of contention with the way the prior calculation was done, and we felt that this was a safe bet for us based on the information that we analyzed.
And the bullet point 4, is that still in the works, or do you have that to?
Yeah, I just wanted to make it known that we would still charge for any services, traffic control, meter bags, sign posting, all of those miscellaneous costs would still be invoiced to the applicant
And they'll be charged at the cost of whatever.
on the fee schedule in place now.
What else was I going to ask here? Based on this, would your recommendation be, like, we get asked, as we've talked about all the time, about like waiving fees and this, that, but is this basically what it costs us to support these events? So, or, because my perspective would be, I'd just like to have it flat, what it costs us to support the events. Then we don't have to fool around with all of these, oh, I want this money back, oh, I want that money back, that we don't keep track of. And I'd just like to be able to say, this is what it costs us. That's my hope. And is this basically, I mean, barring the parking, which it sounds like we give 50% of whatever we charge back to the applicant anyway. So, but for like 3 and 4, is this basically what it costs us?
So for the salaries, that is a true cost, because again, all of these events that we pay our employees, they're all done, after hours. So it is at a premium overtime rate. So I do feel that these are true costs for our employee services. As for the event calculation, I do think it's necessary to make it clear for everyone that there is an across the board fee for all events. I have found that there's all these different rates being charged, and it's not, what we have on our fee schedule. So from my perspective, I think it's very important to set one fee for every event.
You were, I'm sorry, Ms. Shimoni, you were saying rather than have a chargeback, just charge it up front. You think it would be less confused, the 50%?
No.
back?
I was just saying that's not necessarily the cost, but at the end of the day, if they bring all these people in for parking and we say, but it's still a flat thing. Like if we say there's $10 for all of these parking and however many cars you bring into the borough that park there and pay us $10, we'll give you $5 on the 10. Like that still sounds like a flat fee and it's not necessarily our costs, but it's understandable. So, yeah.
Any public comment?
Hi, this is Keith Karowski with the Parks and Rec Department. Can I say something?
Go ahead.
One of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to these events is the event applicants don't always necessarily believe that they need the support. And it's the police department's determination what needs to be in place to make that event safe. And that is in itself a lot of the issues or concerns that come back and forth. An applicant will say, I want to have XYZ event. I don't need police. I don't need public works. But then once reviewed by the departments within the borough, it is determined, yes, you do need this. And that's a lot of where the confusion comes in. It really is relying upon the police to say, hey, in order for you to have an event on public space that is, governed by the borough, we need to have X amount of officers. That's usually where the biggest rub comes, is the police overtime fee. I think Barb's done a really good job of trying to figure out what those fees are. Again, that's above and beyond my pay grade when it comes to calculating all those overhead costs. But I think if we have those fees in place, like we talked about earlier with the Porch Fest, again, there was an estimation given to them, but it's actually the boots on the ground day of the event, which are the costs for the event. And that's determined by the two departments, mainly the Public Works Department and the Police Department. I think these fees are fair and reasonable. Again, there's a number of events that take place. When it comes to the parking fees themselves, different events at different times generate different parking fees. So some events may seem like they're getting more back from the parking, but that's not really for us to determine. That's just the people that are coming to the event and the day of the week that it's taking place.
Thank you.
Thank
Can
you.
I ask,
Sure.
God, can I ask you a question? Keith?
Yes. I'm right here.
But so would you recommend a similar kind of chart from the police department that kind of says if your event's expected to be this big, that like some kind of clarity for those applying, so that they have an idea before they apply what what support the police is going to recommend that they need? Some transparency there. Is that something you would recommend that could help with some of this back and forth?
Yes and no. I mean, yes. I mean, from an event from year to year that's happening over and over again, we have a very good idea. But to the point of like the Green Team, their event has changed and grown in the last 3 years. If you buy more groceries, you're expecting to pay more money. So therefore, if an event grows or changes geographically, it's going to require different requirements from the police. If an event has a beer and wine garden, it's going to be, looked at differently than a one that doesn't. So there may be a way to get to that point based on previous events. But each event itself is, and every application that comes across is unique unto itself and what the applicant is asking for. So that's, again, part of the reason we also have a 60-day review period to kind of go over these things. And sometimes it takes as much as the 60 days to get that looked at. It's something we can further develop and trying to look at, as a whole. But like I said, each event has its own life.
Thank you. Any further questions from the public?
So, Barb, thank you very much for that estimation. Really appreciate that. I guess my question is, since it went from 180 to 150, did you also calculate in the cars? Because I think that was part and parcel of the entire package. And then I wondered who and how did they arrive at the 180 several years ago, when I know costs haven't really gone down across the board, and certainly the salaries haven't gone down. I just wonder who did that before and why the difference in what's being omitted now. Thank you. And one other question, I'm sorry. Now, you have staff recommendation for the $10 fee, but I listened to Ramsey say $20. So I'm wondering, which staff are you saying are recommending this $10 fee? Because heretofore, it's been $20 for special events, sometimes 10, and I certainly see the need to establish one price so that it doesn't fluctuate. That's certainly important. But also, why the 50% being credited back? What's that about?
So
The
that-
borough, that could be income for the borough. Thank you.
So the $10 fee, that was a discussion that both myself and Mr. Metric had. We did discuss everything with, parking, recreation, and police. And we felt across the board that the $10 fee, would be a good thing across the board to charge. So that's how that fee came about. As to how there may have been a disconnect between, what was discussed last night, but I can say that when these agenda attachments were prepared last week, that's the determination that, myself and Mr. Metric had come up with was $10. Well, yeah, she was not in that meeting, so I will say there was a disconnect between what was spoken last night and what I'm speaking about tonight. Correct, point taken. So how the $180 was determined, that was done by the finance director before myself. As I said last month, I think that that was an attempt because of, times were a lot leaner back when that was first calculated. And I think that that was an attempt to, try to help the budget line items, attempt to calculate for kind of an everything under the sun type thing. And I took a different approach to this calculation because anyone that knows me, I'm kind of a plain person and I like things simple. When I go to the store, I want to pay one price. I don't want to pay a fee on top of that. So this was my attempt, to look at salary expenses, to look at overhead, to look at utilization and come up with a fair number across the board so that some of these points of contention could be resolved. And in that $150 hour, we have calculations in there for the overtime and the overhead and the vehicles and all of that. That's all calculated into that number.
And I would say, from my perspective, if these are the true numbers and these are the true costs, and we can say that with confidence, and I don't have to sit here and try to negotiate with different people coming up, and we say, these are our fees, and we're not negotiating for, once we approve this and it would go forward, that makes me a happier person. If we've got 180, but we negotiate with half the people that have an event that they're not going to pay that 180 anyway, that 180 really means nothing anyhow. So I would rather have something that we feel confident is covering our costs and that we then don't have to try to piecemeal a negotiation, which will ultimately end up not fair because we don't keep very good track of what we negotiate.
I'm in complete agreement with that. I think people should know upfront what they're
And I
getting.
would totally agree that, whatever our fees are, they should be. Borough events are one thing and should be treated differently because they involve the entire borough. But these niche events, whatever they are, should be looked at differently and should be paying accordingly. And, I know some people went off on the permit, and some people went off on the police and everyone wants a discount. And if they can't have the event, if they can't afford the event, then they need to reconsider how they have the event. All of these different events, from music in the park, music in the park, why are we even doing discounts for them? Don't do the music in the park. I mean, that seems like an easy ask, an easy reach to be able to get your neighborhood to pay for that. So I just feel that if you do for one, you have to do for another, then another, then another. And to have the event and then come back and ask for money after the event, That's just remarkable to me.
Agreed, agreed. And again, it goes back to, so I'm not as offended by the decrease of the police cost if we stick to it and we say we're not going to try to hem and haw with negotiations. So.
Mr. O'Brien?
Good evening, John O'Brien, Executive Director of Downtown Westchester. So as we look at this proposal, just full transparency, that will make it more expensive to bring special events to the borough. So I have people contact me, residents contact me all the time. We would love to do this event, love to do this event. I have to be transparent with them that my barrier is going to be the cost of the borough. It is what it is. I will say, to the mayor's point about the garage fee, I think $10 fee is a good fee for most events. Just so you're all aware, the Christmas parade is traditionally $20. Christmas parade is something that people are used to. They seem to pay that $20. So there might, depending on the event, I think you might want to at least be open to like some levels of what that fee in the garage is going to be. Like when I do and bringing with the Chester County Art Association, the Chris Kindle mark, that's newer. $10 is probably all as high as I would want, because I don't want the customer coming to Westchester to be overly offended by that. Moving on to the police fee and the public works fee. I do have some questions about how we're arriving at that fee. So if we're looking at just the overtime cost for the borough, at $150 an hour as an overtime rate, that means that the base salary, just doing crude calculations for that officer, is going to be $208,000. I don't know specifics of what our pay scale is on salaries for the officers. I would venture to guess that the median salary is probably not above 200K for an officer. So then the question becomes, where does that extra revenue go? Obviously, there would be a factor, as Barb mentioned, for some of, payroll taxes and things like that. Certain pension costs, healthcare costs, especially healthcare costs, is a static item. It's not really going to be determined on the salary. It's based on the employee's existence as an employee of the borough. $90 an hour for for public works would mean that the average public works employee who's coming up and staffing an event is roughly around $125,000 base salary. Once again, I would question if the borough is paying quite that well. So the question becomes, where's that money going? I understand the consternation with special events. I think, from what we hear from residents, it is the key reason why people move to town, is because they like these community events that we do. The applicant ourselves has zero control over the amount of staff that comes to an event, and it always seems to grow from like year to year. And the Christmas market could be an example. Last year, we had 2 police officers that were up there for the event. This year, so preliminarily, I've been informed we want 11 officers and 2 canine units. So I'm going from a cost averaging out. Last year, it cost between $5,000 to $7,000. This year, it's going to cost around $22,000 in the rough cost. Now, that's without a $10 fee discount, so there's going to be some drop off there. It just makes it extremely prohibitive. I try and shake the money tree for sponsors as much as humanly possible, but it's ultimately going to be a determination of council, and I do want to work with you. When we started this conversation, I think the idea was to understand where fees were, if they were adequate. It's kind of morphed now, sadly, to let's charge more money. And you're going to see less events as a result. And I don't know if there's any answer to a little bit more in the math of how some of those calculations were done. And like I said, I don't know the median salary of those employees. I don't think we're paying those employees that well. So, and then when we get into other items, traffic control devices, meter bags, sign postings. You know, there is a de minimis cost with the meter bag sign, things that we're going to throw away, traffic cones, borough vehicles. They exist already. We're not buying special vehicles for events. I know there's been previous conversations, talks about depreciation. I think if we talk to any actuary, they would say whether the vehicle is sitting out on Walnut Street or whether it is parked here at 401 East Gay Street, it's going to depreciate the same way. So I'm not really sure that depreciation factors in there. When the borough is evaluating what it costs to the borough, the costs should really be focused on unexpected overtime manpower costs. And I'm not looking to bring an event to town and make the borough pay for it. But when there are like items for posting and parking, that is generally done between the normal 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Outside of the cost of that physical sign that's being placed on a meter, tree, wherever, that's not really an additional cost to the borough. So, you know, obviously from our perspective, we're not, you know, I can't sit here and say that we're supportive or happy with the direction that this proposal is going. As I mentioned before, it's obviously staff's prerogative. I think it might have been a little bit helpful to bring more stakeholders into the arrival of this, to hear that outsider perspective of what it is to bring that. That wasn't done. And so that's where we sit tonight. So I appreciate your time and the work that we can collaborate together on. This just is a little tough pill to swallow sitting here. So thank you.
Thank you, John. The one suggestion then is that we would need to probably incorporate all of these events into our budget moving forward. That would be one way. We do it as an estimate moving forward. Then we really don't have to worry about these types of things. I feel that maybe we loop back in parking. We table this maybe again the next month. We look at it that way and take a little bit more time to look at things. Did a great job with the analysis here. But maybe, go ahead.
Mentioned several times about the cost of the employees. As I said in the beginning, this is a average of both a supervisor in the police and in public works and officers and public works, and it's a mix. It's an average of those costs. So it's not that that's the cost of one employee.
Thank you for that clarification. So, you know, I think next year we're going to have to decide, do we want to put this into the budget or not? But with that, I would feel more comfortable tabling it next month. We look at it again.
One other thing I just want to put out there in case people are unaware, and I forget, Barb, if you can remind me, because I forget the number, but BID does get a big pile of money from Westchester Borough. It's not just these fees that supports these events. BID gets a big pile of money. Do you remember what the big pile of money is? Yeah, $85,000. So we are already paying fees and things and helping you out that way. So I want to make sure that anyone who is paying attention right now, I know it's getting late, but maybe you watch it on Facebook. But you know, this is not the sole support that the borough provides all of these events. So keep that in mind. You know, John, if you want to ask for more money of your big pile of money, you know, maybe you go about it that way and you provide some estimates for that, for the going back to the budget piece, but you get $85,000.
Sure. And understanding, I'm not speaking purely from my point of view. We appreciate the borough's contribution. That 85 has been static since 2000. It is an important piece of our budget. You know, it is just, you know, for frame of reference, because for people in my organization, similar ones, you know, we're roughly about a $420,000 organization. King of Prussia is a $10 million budget. Manioc is like 1.5 million. So we try and do what we can with, you know, a much smaller resources to bring people to the downtown to support our businesses and which helps the property values of the town. So I'm not saying this just purely as mine. There are a lot of other community events that are brought onto town that are not just specifically limited to what my organization engages in. For a long time, we were not as highly engaged in the events. That's kind of a post-COVID thing. With limitations that Parks and Rec has, we've kind of tried to step into that role. So we've tried to, step up because we've heard from, from members of council, from the public, both residents and business owners, that they want to see more events in town. So we've tried to be responsive to that. So thank you.
Thank you.
And so the only note I wanted to make is John mentioned that the costs were going up when in fact they've gone down from 180 an hour for the police to 150 based upon the current assessment. So I did want to just mention that they're not going up, they're going down, and even the parking is going down. So.
Thank you. And if we're all comfortable tabling it to next month, reevaluating this again.
I'm okay. Barb, I know you just got beat up a little bit with your but it's all good. Get there.
All right. Thank you. Item C, move the July 2024 meeting minutes. Any comments? Any public comments? Any objections? Seeing none. So we can move that to consent. Item 6, new business, motion to sponsor the Westchester Downtown Foundation Preservation Awards. That's taking place October 17th at the Chester County Historical Society. And basically that's for projects and individuals that have awarded to maintain the historic character of Westchester. We've done this before. We sponsored this before. Are there any questions about this? Any public comment? Any objections? Seeing none, we're okay with that. Item A, and we can move that to consent. And then motion to approve purchasing requests. So we got, let me just see here, 5 of them. Let me read them off here. Delaware Environmental Construction Services, $26,115. And that was for the spring 2024 tree planting. Horgan Tree Experts, $10,280. That's tree pruning. That took place in Parks at the Historical Society and off of Maryland Avenue. Univar Solutions, $13,155.25. That's soda ash removal at Taylor Run Wastewater Treatment Facility. USALCO, $12,540. That's phosphorus removal. We have item E, which is enterprise leasing schedule. So there are 4 items under item E here. There's a 2025 police interpreter, and that's at $50,629. There's another police vehicle, 2025 Ford Explorer, $41,722. There is a 2024 Ford F-150 at $48,070. That's a litter truck for Public Works. And then we have 2025 Nissan Leaf, $27,803, and that's for housing. Are there any questions regarding a motion to approve those 5 items? Comment. Any objections from the dais? Okay, we could call that item move to consent. Item 7, other business. Any other business here? I just want to mention a couple of things that I have discussed with Sean and Barb. A couple of things that should go publicly, such as Barb's work and the work of the previous and current Finance Committee of turning budget deficits into surpluses. The update, if I'm allowed to say, of the credit rating from AA negative, that is to AA stable, which is good. So Barb, people within your department, yourself, everyone else. Sean, thank you. You're doing a hell of a job with that, improving the borough's finances as well as what we've done on savings for our pension. So these are things that we should, let the public know what's going on. We're also getting money in our budget as far as in our different departments regarding our finances and investments. That's a good thing. I don't know how many boroughs or municipalities are doing that, but extra income, 60,000, 80,000, whatever it is, that's more than we've had before, right? And more income is better than no income or losing income. So I just want to say you should be commended for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Same with Sean and everyone. So, and again, previous members on the council, Nick Allen, Bernie Flynn, we were there when we made a lot of those decisions. Any other business? All right, seeing none, let's adjourn. 8:30.